All right, hello. I am Professor McCoy, and today I want to do something related to my Star Wars Expanded Universe series, and I just want to go through all of this, and I want to give my various book recommendations for the post Return of the Jedi Star Wars Expanded Universe. So a couple of caveats here. First of all, I haven't read all of this. I read a lot of this, a lot of it multiple times, but some of this I have not read. This also includes a lot of things. There are a few video games in here that I'm going to kind of sort of glaze over. I'll maybe mention them, especially if I'm thinking about streaming them. That's an option. A couple of those on there. But beside that, there's also a bunch of comics I've only read some of, and so to keep this in mind when we're going through this, that I'm really only going to talk about the things that I have read. And I first want to do a really quick run through of what you really ought to read, and then I'll go through and give you additional things that, okay, these are good, these are okay, these are and these you can just completely ignore, that sort of thing. Okay, so I'm gonna go through these in the list order. Ones that you definitely should read if you want to get a good idea of the entire plot breakdown of the post Return of the Jedi expanded universe. Here's what you need. So, first of all, oops, I really should have put my marker ready. Here we go. Let's make this a little bigger. Here we go. Oops, interesting. So I'm gonna give the absolute needed ones here in blue. And let me turn the opacity down so you can actually read them. So absolutely need The Truce at Bakura. Absolutely. Read The Truce at Bakura. Truce at Bakura takes off literally hours after the end of Return of the Jedi. It is absolutely worth reading. It is a good book. It's not an amazing book, but it's absolutely essential. I would say that it is good enough that it'll be good enough to read just because on its own merits, but then also it is chronologically the first step in the expanded universe that really sets things off, and it gets referenced a bunch by a bunch of different authors at a bunch of different times. Absolutely worth reading. The next thing that you absolutely need would be all the way down here with the X-Wing series. So X-Wing Rogue Squadron is absolutely crucial, as well as the next 3 of the X-Wing books. That is Wedge's Gamble, The Krytos Trap, and The Back to War. Now I say the next 3 and not these following 3, not because the following 3 are not good. They're fantastic. There's a good argument to be made that they're better than the preceding 4, and I'll talk about that when we get back around to it. But they follow a different squadron of pilots. They follow Wraith Squadron, and that is not as essential to the overall plot. Now, I would really highly recommend them because they lead into the next thing that is absolutely necessary, which is the courtship of Princess Leia, which is essentially the story of how Han and Leia fall in love. This is the one where notoriously Han Solo wins the planet of Dathomir in a Sabacc game. He basically wins it for Leia. There's a weird little side plot about C-3PO writing a pop song about Han Solo. I've talked about this in another video, link in the description. It's really important. It is absolutely worth reading. The Wraith Squadron books, the next 3 of the Rogue Squadron ones, of the X-Wing series, they lead directly into the courtship of Princess Leia, but they were written after the fact, so they're not absolutely essential. I'd still really highly recommend them because they're really good. I'll come back to that. But if you're just trying to get a good feel of what the EU is about and then maybe filling in the blanks later, Courtship of Princess Leia absolutely introduces the planet Dathomir, introduces the witches, introduces some characters who are going to be absolutely crucial moving forward. You need to read it, and it's good. It's a good book. Then we have the Thrawn Trilogy. Read them all. Just read all of them. The three books of the Thrawn Trilogy are very good. First of all, they're excellent books. They're not the best of the EU. That title probably goes to the X-wing series, or maybe parts of the new Jedi Order. But they are very good, and they're probably the most referenced bit of Star Wars Expanded Universe ever. If you've read anything from the EU, it's probably the Thrawn trilogy, and right there it is. But here's the thing, you'll notice that this is quite late in the timeline. This is 5 years after the Battle of Endor, after the end of the original trilogy, and there's a lot to fill in those gaps. So, read The Truce at Bakura, read X-Wing, read Courtship of Princess Leia, and that is going to lead us more or less right into the Thrawn trilogy. Right? So that is actually, I really don't recommend that you read the Thrawn trilogy first. If you're just getting into the EU, start chronologically. Go Truce at Bakura, go X-Wing, then get to the Thrawn trilogy, then get to Courtship of Princess Leia, then get to the Thrawn trilogy, then move on from there. Now, as far as the Dark Empire, I'll put a little dot here, because you have to at least know about Dark Empire, and that actually goes for both parts. Right, so this part and this part. But I don't actually recommend reading the comics, or even really the audio dramas. I haven't actually gotten through the entirety of the audio dramas. They do seem like they're better than the comics, so that might be a better way of getting through it. And there's a decently made, basically fan movie using a lot of AI that came out recently. I watched the first few episodes of it. It seems decent. Like I said, I don't think it's really worth reading, because there's a lot of really dumb points, especially in light of the prequels, sort of retrospectively. So I don't necessarily recommend reading Dark Empire, but you do absolutely need to be familiar with the events, because the events are really, really important moving forward. So familiarize yourself, even if that just means reading a synopsis or whatever. I don't recommend necessarily reading the whole of both comic runs. Maybe the audio drama, something like that. You do need to kind of know what happened, so follow along. Next thing that you definitely need to read would be the Jedi Academy trilogy. And with it, iJedi. In that order, ideally. Both of these tell the story of Luke Skywalker reestablishing the Jedi Order. He finds his new students, he starts teaching them, things go awry, all kinds of shenanigans ensue. I've got some videos either coming out soon or having just come out, I haven't decided on the order yet, involving iJedi, which I have right here by Michael Stackpole. All of this story is great. iJedi is the much better version of the story. They tell... there's overlap in the stories they tell from different perspectives. But you really probably ought to read both of them separately, because they introduce different characters and different plot points and stuff. So I would absolutely say, yes, read the Jedi Academy trilogy and read iJedi. They're both worth reading. iJedi is better as far as just plain writing goes. But the Jedi Academy trilogy is still good, and it's still worth reading, and it still ties in quite a bit to some later things. Next thing I want to briefly mention, Jedi Knight 2 Jedi Outcast is a video game. And it's one that I'm thinking about playing on live stream. So there you go. It takes place right there. X-Wing Starfighters Vatamar is really fun, but we'll come back to it. It's not that necessary. I would, however... No, it's not Twilight. That's not the one I'm thinking of. The next thing I would definitely say that you need to read is the Black Fleet Crisis. And I'll say that with a caveat that it is not the best written of the EU, and also it has great military sci-fi, space battle stuff, and some really neat force tricks and things like that. But also it kind of involves some things that wind up getting retconned by the prequels, and it involves some really weird side quests that are fun but kind of side questy. It does set the stage for a lot of things to come. It's worth reading. It's bordering on essential reading. Same really applies to the Corellian trilogy. The Corellian trilogy are decent. They're okay. They're pretty good, but they are very important. They play into the children of Han and Leia Solo a whole lot, and it's a lot of stuff that comes back as being incredibly important in the new Jedi Order series down there, and the Legacy of the Force series right after, which is over in Legacy era all the way over there. Next, you have the Hand of Thrawn duology. Again, pretty crucial. it's basically the part where Luke and Leia, not Luke and Leia, jeez, Luke Skywalker and Mara Jade fall in love. It's wonderful. I would also really recommend Union, this one. It's a comic, so if you're not into comics, it's short. It's a one issue, and it's about Luke and Mara's wedding. It's not essential, but it's really sweet. I'll come back to that and talk about it a little more in detail. Junior Jedi Knights, Survivor's Quest, maybe. Actually, no, I will say Survivor's Quest is actually it's pretty important, but it's not crucial. The Young Jedi Knights series, both parts, are oddly essential reading. They are young adult novels. They're bordering on children's novels. They feature the solo children, so primarily the twins, Jason and Jaina, when they are preteens to young teenagers. No, I think they're young teenagers. I think they're 13 and then into 14, something like that. They are surprisingly well written, especially considering the target audience is like young adults, like preteen kind of thing. And a lot of the characterization of Jason and Jaina solo happen in this series. And so does the introduction and characterization of some other very important characters moving forward. Lobaka, for example, Chewie's nephew. Tenel Ka, the future Queen Mother of Hapes, whose parents were introduced in the Courtship of Princess Leia. People like this. A lot of stuff gets introduced that's really crucially important in this series, that gets referenced a whole lot going forward. And yeah, they're kids' books, but they're actually really good kids' books. They cover a lot of interesting material in really interesting ways. I'll probably do some videos on a couple of them at some point. I've talked about them on live streams here and there. But yeah, I do actually recommend them. They're even worth reading for like an adult audience. They are actually well done. They're good. Then, hold on, let me make my marker bigger. This stuff. Chewbacca, you don't need to. For reasons I don't want to spoil. But if you know, you know. And then the rest of the stuff. There we go. All that, read it. This is the new Jedi Order series. This is the much talked about Yuuzhan Vong War. This is the war of with the extragalactic invaders called the Yuuzhan Vong. I highly recommend reading it. It's all really, really good. It is the start of a new era. It is a dramatic shift in tone, and it is some of the best of the Star Wars EU. It's not my favorite. That title goes to iJedi over here, but it's really, really, really good, and there's a lot of it. Oops. I would say the next part that I would, again, I do still highly, highly, highly recommend. Ooh, not like that. Oh no, what have I done? There, fixed it. Sorry. Yeah, the next part, I definitely recommend the Legacy of the Force series, which is actually what I'm rereading at the moment as of this recording. I recommend it. It is really good. And that goes with these three as well. So all of these. Ooh, I'm getting lag. Anyway, I recommend all of the Legacy of the Force ones. They're a direct continuation of the New Jedi Order series and the Dark Nest trilogy here, which is kind of an interlude. All absolutely crucial. They are the direct development of a lot of these major characters from throughout here. Millennium Falcon, I'll recommend, but it's not absolutely necessary. It's good, but you don't need it. Then the Fate of the Jedi series is a decent stopping point. Not to say I don't recommend what comes after, but it's a decent stopping point. Let me put it that way. Because the EU kind of petered out at this point. There were other things that were written, like X-Wing Mercy Kill. Crucible was written shortly after. And then there's this massive time jump, you'll notice, to the Legacy comics. Those were, it was a comic series, and they take place about 100 years later. You can tell when they were written because they took place 100 years after the current time in the timeline, so they were written around the time of the Dark Knight Trilogy. They started them. But they are, they're their own sort of thing. Because they're so much later, they don't really carry on a lot of the same stories. They involve, like, the descendants of a lot of our favorite characters, but they're not, like, I don't always recommend them. This right here in bright blue, this is my highest recommendation for the Star Wars EU timeline. Now, I want to go through it with a little bit more of a fine-tooth comb. But if you're just looking to get into, hey, what do I need to read to catch up with the EU and figure out what's going on here? This will do you. You can stop the video here if you really want to. And I will see you in the next one. If not, though, if you want my direct opinions on a lot of these, I'm going to go through and give some more granular, how are these bad boys? Because some of these are really good, and some of these you can skip, and some of these are somewhere in between. Put it that way. I wouldn't say any of these are just bad, like badly written. Certainly not on the level of the bad stuff that we've been getting. And I will also say that some of these I just haven't read, so I will be skipping over some still. But I'll be going through with a little bit more of a fine-tooth comb. So, going back to the beginning, back over here to Truce at Bakura. I will say that Truce at Bakura is good. It's not excellent. It's not my favorite. It's not the best, but it's good. So I'm going to just kind of go over it with some green. You know, green for good. It's a good one. It's worth reading. This is a video game. These are comics, the X-Wing comics. The X-Wing comics are decent. They're worth reading if you're into Star Wars and if you're into comics. I'll just highlight the title here. Not each one individually. Like, I have trouble distinguishing individual comics in a run like this. They're worth reading if you like comics and you like Star Wars and you like the characters. If you like Wedge and Hobby and Jansen, and you want to know, you want some more like Rebels versus Empire action stuff, it's pretty good. They're not bad. They're some of the good Star Wars comics, but they're take it or leave it. You can skip them. Luke Skywalker in the Shadows, Mindwar, it was early. I don't necessarily recommend it. It's not bad. It's worth reading if you really want to, but you don't necessarily need it. Dark Force is a video game that I probably won't be playing. It's one of those Doom clones with a Star Wars plot to it. So I don't know if I'll bother with it. And then, of course, we have X-Wing. Absolutely essential, absolutely wonderful. All of these books are 100% worth reading. These are, right here, some of the best of the expanded universe. That right there. Some of the best of the EU. I made blue better than green here. You'll forgive me for that. So very good. They are phenomenal. They don't involve any kind of wacky Force nonsense, except for a few tiny little things involving the main character of the first few, Corran Horn. It's mostly just fighter pilots in Star Wars doing Galactic Civil War stuff in the tail end of the Galactic Civil War. It is some excellent writing by two of the best, especially military Star Wars authors, that being Michael Stackpole and Aaron Alston. They're absolutely all worth reading. The characterization is even probably better in these latter three, the Wraith Squadron books. Those do involve Han Solo in the latter two, in Iron Fist and, as you might guess, Solo Command. There's some good books. They're really good stories. They're so well written. I cannot recommend them highly enough. Read them. Absolutely read them. Next up, we have Courtship of Princess Leia and Tatooine Ghost. Both I'd say are green. They're good, but they're good. They're worth reading, even of their own right. Courtship of Princess Leia, if you need it for the timeline. And then Tatooine Ghost is good. It's worth reading. Again, it really develops Han and Leia's relationship. Both of these do, in really nice ways, and it it adds a lot of depth to their characters. Both do. So they're both worth reading. Thrawn Trilogy, I'm going to be controversial here, and I'm going to call these green. They're really good, but they're not the best. They're not the best things in Star Wars. So there. Be that way. They're really good. Like, if you don't know about the Thrawn Trilogy by this point, you should. It involves Grand Admiral Thrawn as this new, big Imperial threat that threatens to destabilize the now fledgling New Republic. Same thing, Izar's Revenge literally picks up immediately with the last scene of The Last Command, the last of the Thrawn Trilogy. It does another one of those perspective shifts where The Last Command, the ending of the Battle of Bilbringi, is from a sort of fleet standpoint, and then the start of Izard's Revenge zooms in to an individual pilot standpoint, and we're back to Rogue Squadron. Wedge becomes the main character, with Corran picking up a major role. So I'd say worth reading, good book. It's not as good as the previous X-Wing books, though. So there we go. First thing to skip is Dark Empire. I'm sorry, skip it. It's just don't. It's if you can find a synopsis or whatever, just skip it. It's okay, but it's not like they're not good. The story is just it's skippable. It's skippable. It's important and there's a lot going on, but there are a lot of really dumb character decisions that happen in the character writing, particularly with Luke. And it makes a lot of the same mistakes that the Disney sequels made. So you can skip it. These other ones, the Boba Fett series, I actually have not read. I've heard good things about it, so check it out maybe. I don't know. I haven't read them. Maybe I should, but moving on to the Jedi Academy. Good. They're good. I would edge towards very good. They're definitely worth reading. There are some flaws to them. There are some flaws, but they're definitely worth reading. Whereas iJedi is just an absolutely amazing, strictly superior version of the Jedi Academy trilogy with some added elements to it. Again, I have several videos on the topic that either have just come out or are about to come out, again, depending on what order I publish these. Absolutely worth reading. Then we go straight to Children of the Jedi, which, has some important stuff, but skip it. It's bad. There's some important stuff going on in there, but it also has some incredibly, unbelievably stupid nonsense that is just... while I'm at it, the Crystal Star is also closely related to Children of the Jedi. That one too. That's another one that's over here. It's a couple of years later. It is not good. Not worth reading. Avoid it if you can. Again, might be worth looking at a plot synopsis especially if you like cringe, but don't like. Darksaber, good. It tells some relatively important kind of stuff. Some of it's a little wacky, but it is good. It is worth reading. X-Wing Starfighters of Adumar, absolutely great. It's excellent. It's zany. It's wacky. It features the golden trio of Wedge, Hobby, and Jansen. It does a little bit of retconning to some stuff in Jedi Academy, which I think is good. It's very good. Starfighters of Adumar is fun. It is all about the fighter pilots of the New Republic at their top gunniest possible, with some political intrigue thrown in, and also some high-class sword fights, literal sword fights with swords with blasters on the end of them. Can't make this up. I mean, they did make it up, but Alston made it up. It's so worth reading. Great book. Check it out. Jedi Knight 2 Jedi Academy. Again, I might read on stream. Watch on stream, not read. I might watch it on stream. Play it. What am I... Getting late here. Anyway, I might play it on stream. Could be fun. Black Fleet Crisis, like I said, is good, but it's not amazing. It has some serious problems. I'll do the title. The whole trilogy is really just one story. So it's good, but you don't really. Let me put it this way: you need to know it. Probably should read it for timeline purposes. But I didn't. Let me put it this way: I didn't reread it on my recent reread of the entire post Return of the Jedi um, reread. You don't really need to. Like I said, a lot of the side quests in the book kind of are really crucial for setting things up for later, but they're also kind of wonky, and they get retconned a lot by the prequels, which is a problem for a lot of these, honestly. But yeah, it's okay. It's pretty good. It's not bad by any stretch. Same with New Rebellion. New Rebellion had some really cool stuff in it. It felt like a very classic Star Wars story, so it's worth reading. It's pretty good, but it's not amazing. I would recommend it, but not like it's not essential. The same probably goes to the Corellian trilogy. As much as I love Corellia is handled a lot better in other places. It does introduce some key characters. It does some really good characterization, but meh. Hand of Thrawn, good. About on par with the Thrawn trilogy. Who would have thought? Yeah. It's best for its character development of Luke and Mara. The rest of it is hit and miss. The actual plot is hit and miss. It's mostly good, but it feels a little paint by numbers at this point, where it's like, new threat from out there tied in with old threat. What shall we do? Send Luke Skywalker to solve the problem. That's how a lot of these books in this era have been, and Hand of Thrawn is just kind of another same old. It feels a little bit samey. But again, it's good. It's worth it for the character development. The Union comic. That's the one about Luke and Mara's wedding. Definitely worth reading. If you can get through a single edition, a single volume comic, it's really sweet. It has no plot significance whatsoever. Nothing from it is almost ever referenced again, aside from Leia talks about the wedding at one point, maybe I think in Legacy of the Force. That's it. So it's nice. It's very nice. It's delightful to read. Let me put it that way. It's completely unessential, but it's very nice to read. Junior Jedi Knights are okay. I skimmed them basically. You can read them if you want. They are at an even more youngster level than the Young Jedi Knights books. They are by one of the two authors of the Young Jedi Knights books, Rebecca Moesta, I believe. They're okay. They're not bad. My problem with a lot of these, and I'll differentiate the Young Jedi Knights books because they're in trilogies basically. They're a mix of. There's this problem that a lot of franchises do, where they have a target audience initially. The target audience for Star Wars is general, right? But then they go forward in the timeline and make material for a younger audience, right? So the Young Jedi Knights series is for a young preteen audience. That young preteen audience probably shouldn't be reading the X-Wing trilogy, the X-Wing series. Or probably shouldn't be reading Black Fleet Crisis. Probably shouldn't be reading the Thrawn books. Or Dark Empire. Or I, Jedi, frankly. Unfortunately, I have to say that. But you kind of need to get a lot of it. Especially because it happens 20 years after the movies. Right? And especially the Junior Jedi Knights books, which are targeted at a genuinely young reader audience. By that I mean 8 to 10 years old kind of thing. The problem with this is they're missing all of this context. And I hate when media franchises do this. It's unfortunate. Because they're okay. They're decent. These are actually mostly quite good, the Young Jedi Knights ones. But it's an audience problem. It's a target audience problem. Survivor's Quest, good. Worth reading. It's kind of a follow-up on the Thrawn duology. It's good, well written on its own. Not too much to say about it, really. As far as the Young Jedi Knights books, the first three, Heirs of the Force, Shadow Academy, and The Lost Ones, are they're They're okay. They are, like I said, these are kind of clumped into 3-book trilogies, into several of them. They're pretty good. They're not amazing though. By contrast, the next few are actually quite good. That is Lightsabers, Darkest Night, and Jedi Under Siege. These are definitely worth reading. They're good. You can't really skip the first 3. You can skim them though. You can definitely skim them. They become crucial. Like, characters in here become crucially important later on in the series, and even later. But they're not as good. The series does, however, continue to get better, as I would very, very genuinely recommend. Like, wholeheartedly recommend. Shards of Alderaan. Sorry, that's a little bit. Shards of Alderaan. I'm gonna keep it green. It's good, but it really starts getting good with Diversity Alliance, Delusions of Grandeur, and then Jedi Bounty and the Emperor's Plague. These get excellent. They get so very good, and thematically brilliant. Character development like crazy. It's actually very good, even just from a literary standpoint, setting aside that they're children's books in a Star Wars context. They're just worth reading. They're very, very good. That group of 4, which is sort of, Shards of Alderaan is kind of the prelude into that arc, if you will. And then the last 3 are back to good. Not amazing. Actually, you know what? I'm gonna bring that down. They're skippable. They have some good character development stuff, and they have some neat little plot things, and some world building that comes up later. But they're okay. They're okay. They're not the best. Okay, moving on. I'm just going to say, and this shouldn't be that controversial, that the new Jedi Order series, as a whole, gets the dark blue. I'm just going to color in this part. Because the new Jedi Order series is absolutely spectacular. It is some of the best that Star Wars has to offer. It has some low points, but man, does it have some high points. I wouldn't say that it's quite as good as the X-Wing series or as iJedi, but it is fantastic. Overall, I very highly recommend it, and a lot of the reason that I recommend all of these other teal things is so that you can get to and fully understand the new Jedi Order series. That said, the Dark Nest trilogy was only okay. That is the follow-up, the sort of bridge piece from the new Jedi Order over into the Legacy of the Force era, or the Legacy era. The Legacy of the Force series is where Jacen Solo notoriously falls to the dark side. The Dark Nest trilogy is where we first see that starting to happen. I will say that it is definitely worth reading once. It might be worth rereading, but it's only okay as far as its own actual writing goes. Legacy of the Force gets a good. I'll make it green. I'm reading it now. It is a hell of a thing to get through. It's difficult. And the reason I say that it's difficult is because it is deeply bogged down with political intrigue. The 3 authors that trade off in writing it aren't always necessarily on the same page. They do a spectacular... I will say, they do an unbelievably good job, given the fact that these were released... I think each author released one per year, so they were released in 4-month intervals, this whole series, which is incredibly impressive. From a technical writing standpoint, yeah, I can't believe that they were able to coordinate it that well. But still, the gaps show a little bit, and it's... How do I put this? It's a bit tiring to read. Not because it's bad, and not even because of the various flaws that there might be. Just because the subject material of it is so incredibly dark throughout, it has that kind of dread throughout most of the series. If you're into that sort of thing, don't skip it at all. Even regardless, I do still really recommend the series if you're at this point in the timeline, but just be wary that it can be difficult to keep going through it. So keep that in mind. Also, some of the best characterization of Mandalorian culture outside of the Republic Commando series, all by Karen Traviss. Just such a good job. She integrates a lot of that into the Legacy of the Force series, which almost feels like a weird side element, but it does get integrated into the plot quite well. So, Crosscurrent and Riptide I haven't read, so I can't say anything about those. Millennium Falcon is good. Is very good. It's not excellent. It's not like New Jedi Order or X-Wing level, but it is very good. I do recommend it. It's worth checking out. It's not essential to the plot at all. The overall big storyline plot, it's not essential, but it is worth reading on its own. Fate of the Jedi. I'm gonna go back to blue here because this is the one which is about Luke and his son Ben on a little adventure of their own while the galaxy is sort of falling apart at the seams due to political intrigue. Oh, and also a lost tribe of the Sith. Oh, and also an eldritch being you may have heard of called Abeloth. A lot goes on in this series, and it's well written, great characters, great plot, and a lot of it is a great deal of fun. Near the end, as you might guess from the last book being called Apocalypse, it gets pretty rough, pretty harsh as well, but absolutely worth reading. Very well written. And then, like I said, Legacy era is, for me at least, take it or leave it. It takes place about 100 years later. Basically all new characters, new plots of stuff that happens distantly in the future. If it's your thing, you might love it, but you might not. You might like me. You might be like me and not. Let me put it this way. If you liked my recommendations here, if you're more or less on this same page as you read through, skip Legacy. Just end it with maybe end it with Fate of the Jedi. I can't say about X-Wing Mercy Kill or Crucible yet. I've not read them. I didn't read them when they came out. I should have. I didn't though. And I haven't gotten to them on my big EU reread. But I have plans to. I may update this. I may at least update you guys or put it in the description once I've read them, and I'll say, hey, definitely check out X-Wing and definitely check out Crucible. Or I might just say, who knows. Anyway, though, here's my recommendation list. Things that you absolutely need to read to follow the storyline, and then things that are in addition to that or aside from that, my just general set of recommendations. Anyway, with that, I hope that this gets at least some people into the Star Wars Expanded Universe. This also, I will mention, does not touch on any of the other eras of Star Wars publishing. There's also the Clone Wars era. There is also the Old Republic era. There's the Dawn of the Jedi era. All of that I'm not really getting into because it wasn't really my thing when I was growing up. When I was growing up, I was into this. This was my jam. Absolutely loved so much of this. I only really started reading any of the Clone Wars era stuff relatively recently, like around the time of the Disney buyout. And I don't know if I've actually... The only Tales of the Jedi is the only Old Republic era stuff that I've read, and those are comics. Not even all of them. But I didn't get into a lot of that. I'd like to, though. I might. And if I do, if I really find that I love that era too, I might do one of these videos for that. But until then, this is what I got. This is my highest recommendation. If you're a big fan of Star Wars and you're not a big fan of the way it's going now, we have all of this still to love. All of this is here for all of us to still follow along with, to still love, to go back and read if you already have, to explore it for the first time if you haven't. And that is just, that's just such an amazing gift to be able to experience all of this for the first time, to expand beyond what we know of Star Wars. and it is completely separate continuity to what they're doing now, so you know they're not going to mess anything up. And in a way that was done so incredibly well. Anyway, like I said, I hope this gets you into it. I hope this is a good starting point, a good way of getting you into it if you are interested. And otherwise, I hope you enjoyed this. Anyway, these are my recommendations, so go read them. I'll see you next time.